Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/slash Tales from Tech Support. In today's episode, guy who builds computers for a living destroys his cheap name brand computer. I once was an adventurer like you. Local shop tried to charge poor woman $300 just to look at her flash drive that only needed the connector soldered back on. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Guy who builds computers for a living destroys his cheap name brand computer. This story is from years ago when I provided tech support for a company of cheap PC clones that are no longer available in the United States, but which are still sold in other parts of the world. Now, to say that many of the purchasers of these computers were first-time users is a vast understatement of the case. Many of my best stories from this time come from the nexus between bad hardware design, cheap customer service solutions, and insanely novice users. I get a call from a young man who introduces himself by declaring that he builds computers for a living. I ask myself, why, if you have the ability to build a computer, would you ever buy one of these cheapo systems? After purchase, he wants to boost the video and bought an add-in VGA card. Installing such a card is easy, but sometimes you have to change a jumper or a dip switch on the computer's motherboard to get the computer to recognize and use the new hardware. For those who don't remember such things, dip switches are like little, tiny light switches that can be turned on and off with the tip of a pin. Pin jumpers are little pieces of plastic that can be placed over two pins to create a closed circuit, or removed to break the circuit. Pin jumpers are cheaper, so that's what we use. Some of our computers at this time have literally 50 or more jumpers, and if you open or close the wrong circuit, it will render the computer unusable without a technician to put things back the way they should be. We had one case of an OCD ADD teenager who had been swapped out twice on his computer after pulling every single jumper off the motherboard, and when he did it for the third time, they bought his computer back from him and banned him from ever buying another one in his life. But that's a different story. So it is not unusual on our computers of the day to need to change a jumper pin configuration for the computer to recognize and use an add-in video card. And knowing this, the young man checks the schematic for the motherboard and the motherboard itself, but cannot identify which jumper does that. But he does see a chip labeled VGA, and so he extracts this chip, but now his computer no longer boots at all. This is a real forehead smack moment for me. First, his model is designed to auto-detect an add-in video card and turn off the onboard video as soon as you boot it up with an add-in card installed. He did not need to change anything for his new graphics card to work. Second, the only chip on his motherboard that had VGA written on it is his CMOS BIOS chip. For those of you who don't actually build computers for a living, this is the only part of the computer that is programming when you first turn a computer on. Its job is to make sure everything needed is there for the computer to work, and then looks for and loads the more extensive programming normally stored on the hard drive that gets you doing all the other fun things a computer can do. By removing this chip, he had essentially rendered his computer brain dead. And because it is a flashable CMOS of the EEPROM type, the chip itself was destroyed by the process of removal. Any programming it had contained had been erased by the process. It could not be reinstalled and then made to work. The only viable solution for this issue is a full motherboard replacement. And since what he has done also completely voids his warranty, he has to pay for the parts and labor himself. Needless to say, he is none too happy with this result. He escalates it up to my supervisor and then my manager, but I leave extensive notes, and it remains a non-warranty repair. A little knowledge can be a dangerous thing. Edited. Let me first express my appreciation for the generosity and kindness of this community. We all have had some fun in the Wayback Machine with this one. The two most frequently asked questions, which are both answered in the comments below, but it is getting harder and harder to find them there. 1. Why was the BIOS stamped VGA? Because VGA was still new and this company offered computers that had VGA and cheaper ones that did not. So they had stamped all of the VGA-compatible BIOS chips with VGA to aid manufacturing. 2. How would removing an EEPROM from a socket erase it? It wasn't socketed on this motherboard. I suspect to save costs, the company had opted to solder the chipset to the MOBO. While I did not ask if he had unsoldered it or just pried it off, I would bet milk money based on the result and the rest of the call that he dry pried it. What was made clear in the call was that he had tried to reinsert it before calling, and still could not get the system to boot. He either flashed the EEPROM, damaged it, or damaged the MOBO. Either way, result is dead system, non-warranty repair, and we really didn't have to troubleshoot further. And you know they are always breathing down your neck in such settings to shave as many seconds off your calls as possible. I once was an adventurer like you. I used to do help desk support by contract, but now I do incident management for several accounts my company does tech support for. Back when I was on that help desk, I was basically an L2 in all but title and pay. I even used to copy KBs into a OneNote so I could find them quicker, and I did my own notes of things I learned from experience. Like the fact that escalation contacts were out of date. Or you could ping a guy on Messenger and he could fix the issue in a few clicks, and then you still get FLR rather than sending a ticket up, and said guy preferred to be pinged rather than have a ticket. Kinda like an IT version of the Half-Blood Prince's textbook. One of the accounts I do IM for is the account I used to be on. My VM for this client wasn't booting, and I had to call my old help desk. This client's contract is expiring soon, and they had already made a deal with another vendor. So my company relocates all of the FTEs from that account, and they bring on short-term contractors to finish out the contract. The guy I got was greener than a Hulk dick pic. Cast. Me. Helpdesk guy, HG. HG, opening script. Me, verifies identity. HG, how can I help? Me, my VM is timing out when I launch Citrix. HG, okay, 1 second please while I do some research. Me, knows that the help desk is swamped and there probably isn't an L2 to help him. Also me, hey, my man, open your VM. HG, what? Me, open your VM. HG, okay. Me, pull up URL for Citrix admin console in Chrome. Sometimes it crashes Firefox for some reason. HG, got it. Me, search for my username. You should see my VM name, click on the little arrow on the right. Under status, it should say connection failed, timed out in red, right? HG, yeah. Me, click on shutdown and tell me when the red light on the left goes off. HG, it's off. Me, click power on and tell me when the light on the left goes from yellow to green. HG, okay. You've done this before, obviously. Me, you could say that. HG, sorry, I'm new. Me, it's alright. HG, yeah, my manager gave me this OneNote from someone who used to work here. Now that I have a minute, it says to do exactly what you told me. Me, it was copied from the KB. HG, might be. Me, no, it was. HG, how do you know? Me, because that OneNote is probably called brute_squad_44's company name cheat sheet. HG, it is. Me, look at the name in the caller field of your ticket. He laughed and we made some small talk until my VM showed as registered. A few minutes later, my old boss pinged me and called me a smart ass. Good times. Local shop tried to charge poor woman $300 just to look at her flash drive that only needed the connector soldered back on. I run a small all-inclusive computer repair business. This includes component-level motherboard and appliance repair, all the way to network and security help. Just about everything. I was an electrical engineer before doing this, so I'm able to do repairs many people aren't. I got a call from a woman that her flash drive is broken. Me, hello there. So do you know what happened to the USB drive? My kid put it in his mouth. Now it won't read anything on the drive. Me, well, I would have to look at it, but most likely, if the data is very important to you, you should send it to a recovery service. That's what the other shop said, but they said they would charge $300 just to collect it, and send it in, and then charge more on top of that if they get the data off. Me, I see. Do you know what kind of flash drive it is? I don't know, it's from Amazon and it doesn't have a brand name. This is a problem because if I cannot find an exact replacement with the exact same controller and revision, I likely won't be able to switch out the controller IC. Me, well, I don't charge if I don't fix your problem, so bring it on by. Because the other shop was a reputable shop with good reviews, I had assumed they had done their due diligence. My assumption was that the drive had no obvious issues, and that trying to recover the data was going to be a pain in the ass. It turns out that the other shop either had a bad day, or just doesn't know anything about soldering. She arrived with the drive, and I noticed the USB connector is very loose. It's held in by the plastic housing of those bulk cheap flash drives you find on Alibaba. I break open the plastic, and I see that the USB connector has sheared off and broken 2 of the 4 pads. This is the best case scenario. Me, hey, I don't think you need to send this off to get repaired. I think the drive itself is intact, the USB connector just sheared off. It's kind of the best case scenario, but I'm surprised the other shop didn't already do this for you. It took me about 10 minutes to solder back on 3 of the 4 leads onto the pads, and one of them had ripped off, so I ran a jumper wire to a capacitor that was along the same 5V input, and the drive showed up in Windows. It was very wonky, but it worked. I pulled her files off of it and put it on one of my disposable drives. I get decent quality drives in bulk for customers' data, and handed it back. I did not charge, but she ended up tipping me $50 anyway. It sucks that some of these techs not only do not know how to fix basic stuff, but doesn't know enough to know that someone else could.